it up. Just like to go over the agenda briefly. We'd like to go over the agenda briefly with you. Opening next meeting, we have a quick overview or short overview of ALCDC with Dr. Calvin R. King, our president. We have the Arkansas Human Development, Arkansas Department of Human Services, Mr. James or Jim P. Mr. Jim P. or James P. Are you on? I saw you earlier. Just wanted to touch base. I'm not going to butcher his name. He's the program administrator who's going to explain the program to us. Then we have a Q&A session, and then we have closing remarks with Dr. King. And after that, we'll have application development with Mike Tucker and myself. With that being said, we're going to go to our president, Dr. King. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. We apologize for being a little early, but we're right on time. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if this is going on. Can you all hear me? Let me express my appreciation also again for all those who are participating in this particular meeting. And the way this came about is an attempt, at least, to make sure that we did a connection between the growers and the market opportunity outlet with Arkansas Department of Human Services. This is something that we've done in previous years, and we would have a number of various buyers and other different outlets of those who are buying horticultural crops, vegetable crops, and fruits and vegetables in Arkansas, the surrounding areas. And this is consistent with some of our past activity. Also, but due to COVID-19 in previous years, we have not been, and these meetings are normally basically in person. After COVID-19, of course, you all know what has occurred over the years behind that. And we did not continue to have the events consistently as we have done in the past. So I'm really pleased to see, this market opportunity and what Arkansas Department of Human Services is doing as it relates to creating local market opportunities. As I understand it, I think this is possibly a commitment for a 2-year time period. But with this opportunity, I think possibly or hopefully more can be done with it, and not to have a time limit on it for 2 years, but it can be something that hopefully can be permanent, and understand the benefits and what it would mean to the state of Arkansas, those who are presently existing producers, what it could mean also for expanding market opportunity for the present local producers, but it can also represent for diversifying agricultural production in our areas, with individual understanding the local market opportunity and building the capacity of local market opportunities in itself. And there's a lot involved with that whole process as well. I'm going to stop at this point regarding to this particular meeting, connecting market opportunities and networks to growers. And just in reference to Arkansas Land and Community Development Corporation, we have program service delivery in 3 division areas. One is our agricultural economic development. The other is our youth program, which begins with the phase of our work experience next week in a youth camp. And we have housing advocacy. Of course, the parent organization itself, Arkansas Land and Community Development Corporation, as the basic foundation dealing with housing and our asset holding corporation with housing development. It owns the Fargo site, roughly about 300 acres here, and roughly some 4 or 5 subdivisions of housing or affordable housing. That's an overview of the organizations, where we are, things that we're presently involved in doing from the community economic development perspective. Again, this is seriously a community economic development opportunity, both for future job creation, expansion of market opportunity itself, expanding possible growth potential for existing producers, and creating opportunities for new producers, particularly those who seek to or want to become what we call micro-urban farmers. It also presents itself as an opportunity to reinitiate what was done some years ago and some work that I did back with cooperative development, linking together and putting together groups of smaller producers into cooperatives, and those cooperatives creating the volume and the diversity in crop production that will be necessary for the market supply. As far as after the 2-year time period, the possibility behind this, we have an upcoming farm bill that's coming into place. I think this opportunity that exists now for the various states is something that really hopefully will be addressed in the farm bill to create a budgetary type of opportunity for continuation, that being one, and possibly something that would become more permanent by way of entitlement monies to the State Department of Agriculture and with the Department of Human Services for an ongoing type of program initiative. So I'm going to stop at this point. I'm going to turn it over to our guest with the Department of Human Services, Mr. James Panzetta. Am I pronouncing it right? Panzetta?
That's as close as anybody ever gets. So I appreciate the introduction. No, my name is Jim Ponzini, and I'm a program administrator here at DHS over the Commodity Distribution Unit. We handle all the food distribution for USDA programs, whether it's for the schools, child and adult care facilities, summer feeding programs, the emergency food assistance program, which is the household. We have a senior program, and we also assist during disaster. And so we're a logistics operation and ordering food, bringing it into the state and distributing it for those programs. I'd like to first introduce two people who are joining with me. The first is Ms. Pamela Burton. She's my boss and assistant director over the Health and Nutrition Unit and the Commodity Distribution Unit, and is great support of all that we're doing here in the state. And also with me is Demetrios Gelli, and she's over the household programs as well as the financial end of our operations. And so she's very deep into these grants and how we'll be working with them. And so with that being said, let's get into the opportunities that came to us here at DHS. And as a partner with USDA, they've proposed 2 grants that we applied for, and they're both very similar, but just a slight variation, which is going to be great for local farmers. And these grants are designed for socially disadvantaged farmers in the state. And so we're trying to gather as many participants as we can to help promote farmers in the state and to get items to the public and into schools. So the first grant is a 2-year grant, and which we applied for. We're waiting to get word that we've received the grant. It's a non-competitive grant, so we're not too worried that we'll receive it, but we still need to wait on word. And what that does is partner up you as farmers, local farmers, and our food banks to provide food for underserved areas and communities of the state. Underserved being families that may live in rural areas that have a tough time, hard to get to grocery stores or have food supply. And so this is a way to get food to them. That's just an overview. And I want to tie it in with the second grant and how that's going to work. The second grant is similar to the first one, but it's local farmers and having their items available and sold to schools under the National School Lunch Program here in the state. That, I believe, is a year and a half or year and 10-month grant. And so what we're doing now, we're waiting to receive word on these grants that they are approved and we have funding so that we can go before the legislature here in the state to get it added to our appropriations and to our budget. It's great to have the grant, but unless we have the approval to use the money, we can't do anything. So we're waiting on that, but in the meantime, we want to get as many farmers who would like to participate in these two grants to get their information so we can begin to start teaming up distributors and farmers ahead of time. The more you can do ahead of time, the better it is for everyone. And then once the funding comes, boom, we're hitting the ground running. I anticipate hearing before the end of June, hopefully, on the first grant, which is the farmers to the food banks. Going through the legislative process of getting everything approved, I anticipate possibly August before we can start spending funds. So it may limit some of the farmers who may have passed a growing season. However, it's a 2-year grant, so you can prepare and work with the distributors for next year. The second grant, the applications close on July 20th. And that's for the schools. So that'll be a little later starting as well. So who are the distributors that we're talking about? For the first grant, we're talking about mainly the food banks here in Arkansas, and we have another distributor who has signed up to participate in the grant. And the food banks are located in Northwest Arkansas, in the Fayetteville area, located in Fort Smith, Jonesboro, North Central Arkansas and Mountain Home, Little Rock, Texarkana, and we have a facility connected with Arkansas Food Bank. They have a facility in Helena. And so we have a regional area. These funds are intended to purchase food and include delivery costs. I know that's one of the things that's a barrier in getting food to distributors is getting it from the farm to the distributors or to the market. Well, we'll have the funding for that. So what we're asking now, and some of you, I believe, have gotten the application, and it may be a little confusing. The application is divided up into the distributors and the farmers. And so for you as the farmer, what we're mainly looking at is getting your name, your contact information. What items do you produce? If you can't deliver, what kind of prices are we looking at for you to arrange delivery? And this is pending, of course, if the food bank can come and pick it up, that's great too. But the funds are available for that. So we wanted just a brief overview of what you have available. And it could be fresh produce, fruits and vegetables. It can be meats, poultries, nuts, canned items, processed items, you name it. It's available for the food banks to then purchase from you. And so what we're doing is compiling the list of farmers and the food banks and getting it out to y'all so that you can begin the discussion for selling your product. Lining up some agreements or of course potential agreements and getting it started so when the funds do come in, you're ready to roll. The same will go for the schools. We're going to use the same list of farmers to provide to the schools who want to participate. And my hopes is that over this 2-year grant period, that the connection that we're making with the local farmers and the food banks and the schools provides an ongoing relationship. And you see that with what USDA and Congress is doing here recently with their budget proposals that they're meeting on now with the farm bill and everything else. They're trying to send more money towards local farmer activities and local farmers between the schools and the food banks. And so that's a brief overview. We're still not at the stage to release any funds, but we're here and available to give any guidance on how this will work. One thing I failed to mention is on pricing, we're looking at market value. We're not asking for discounts. I'm sure the schools and the food banks would appreciate a discount, but that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at a fair value for the farmers, paying for any packaging or boxing that's needed, any delivery costs, and that's what the application is for, to provide us at least some of that information. Not that it's going to be set in stone for delivery prices, but just mainly so we know that you've thought about, okay, this is basically what it's going to cost us to make deliveries. And so with that, I want to stop briefly and see if there are any questions.
James, can
Yes.
you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can.
Okay, this is Calvin King. I have roughly three questions. One, on the producer side and dealing with the market distribution, who paid the producers? Would the food pantry pay the producer? Would DHS pay the producers directly, those who are supplying the market?
what we're proposing or looking at is, as you're making these agreements or sending proposals to the food banks with pricing, that we can give the food banks that money to use towards paying the producer, so that when the producer delivers, there is a quick turnaround time in payment. We have contracts already set up with the food banks to make the transfer easy, and where they can pay the producers quicker than what we could do.
I would agree with you on that. Localizing it to the greatest extent possible definitely is better. My next question, would there be a statement of agreement between the producer and the food bank? Would that be required?
Yes, and that is going along with your negotiations on what you can provide, who's providing transportation, outline of costs, so everybody knows up front of who's doing what, who's responsible for what, so there's no misunderstanding.
My third question, and this is in reference to the transportation. Would transportation be paid for based on the projected budget, or would it be paid for based on a per mile basis in accordance with what the state pays per mile for travel? Would it be based on state travel dollar figure?
What we're looking at is, we understand that it's difficult for producers, small producers, to deliver product throughout the state. And so if, let's say in one case, let's say the producer needs to hire a firm, a trucking firm, to pay for the delivery, we will, the producer should build that into his proposal with the food bank, so that the food bank is aware of what that price will be. And then if the producer says, I've got the capability of transporting that to the food bank, have your charges for that with the food bank.
Okay.
And so does that make sense?
It makes sense. That's why I asked the question, because that was another tail end part to that question, and you're answering part of that now. One is whether it's going to be on a per mile basis. The other was that so you have to understand two things, James. One is that, as you went through, and I asked Albert, give me a list of all the food banks with all these market opportunities where they're going to be located. And you gave all the different areas. You gave one that's within a certain proximity to where we are now, which is Helena, West Helena. Now, it was my understanding there was one in Forest City as well, a food bank there. I'm not sure. You didn't call Forest City off. So I'm assuming that we may only be talking. Yeah, okay. So we're talking about the Helena, West Helena area. Then you get into the Little Rock, the Central Region. Now, of course, this is one of the, when you talk about the market that you're shooting for, this is one of the more economically depressed areas that exist in the state of Arkansas, as far as household income is concerned. So that's Eastern Arkansas. But the market outlet areas on food banks are lesser here than when you get up to northwest Arkansas. And that's not, here to say, this is not a criticism on that part. It's just a part of something that observation, in listening. My other point behind that question, I guess, more than anything, if there is an agreement, so we have our producer, we have a producer that also have transporting capability. If there's an agreement between a group of producers saying this individual producer will transport, and there's an agreed upon dollar amount by those individuals that he will be transporting for, do you have to have that agreed upon cost in transporting it and say getting it to Little Rock or Northwest Arkansas or whatever other area? Would you have to have that statement of agreement between those producers and that transporter in advance to put the cost in? I know they would have to have it in advance between them in order to put it in the application. So would you need that in advance?
You should have like when you're negotiating with the food bank, you should have an idea of transportation costs, just like you would the approximate the cost for the food item. You know, list that as an expense that will be paid by the food bank.
Yeah,
Now, I know if you're negotiating 6 months or a year in advance, you know, those prices may change.
no,
Obviously, the cost of fuel, who knows what it'll do, or the price of delivery, you know, may change, but there should be a, you know, just a meeting of the minds or an understanding of what those charges would be.
right. I mean, I clearly understand. That's why the twofold basis of a question. Now and you're localizing it again, so I understand. But whatever the food bank set forth has to be approved by DHS. So if there's an agreement, we have an agreement between a food bank and say it's going to cost, if our cost would be different. You know the cost of fuel now. So if we're talking about our transportation costs, and we looked at even just based on a per mile basis, on a per mile, then our estimated cost for X amount of trips times this per mile will be the equivalent of this in our cost for transporting twice a week, once a week, or 3 times a week. Running the cost projection, that's no problem. That is no problem. And of course, you determine that based on what the location is, the distance is from the producer to where the distributor is or the food bank may be located. Of course, now you know cost factors would definitely differ from those in certain parts of the state where producers are versus where to access that market opportunity. So I just want to make sure I was very clear on where market opportunities will exist for those who are small producers and minority producers in Eastern Arkansas, limited, one food bank, one, 2, in certain counties you have, again, you know, more distance, talking about rural travel. And if you're going to capitalize on the Central Arkansas food bank area, which will be handling more volume, you're dealing with more volume and distribution there, then getting an agreement, you would need to have, my assumption is this, that there's a possibility that a producer or supplier to the food bank may need to have multiple agreements, a statement, letter of intent to do business with more than one food bank. Say be the one in Helena, West Helena, they say one in Central Arkansas, in the Little Rock area. So they could have more than one that they're supplying. Because of course, you know, the smaller ones are going to have much less volume than the larger ones. And it looks like the big market opportunity is going to be Little Rock.
Well, and first, we're not trying to standardize a rate because we know it's going to be different from anywhere that is being transported within the state. So we're not going to set a rate, but it should be negotiated or brought to the attention of the food bank. Central Arkansas probably isn't going to be where the food is eventually going. It may be coming to a distributor in Central Arkansas, but this is for underserved areas. This food is intended for underserved areas of the state. So we're looking at the food banks distributing it to the rural parts of the state that are underserved by our programs. And so no matter where it's going, whether it's a producer in Helena, and they've got someone interested in Northwest Arkansas or North Central Arkansas or Texarkana, build that cost in for delivery.
Right.
Does
Let
that
me
make
make sure. Yeah, James, let me make sure that I'm hopeful that I'm clear on this, and maybe some others may need clarity as well. I know you have two categories. You have the producer category and you have distributors category. Now, the distributor would be a supplier to the food bank. That's one. That's one category. So a distributor could be a supplier to the food bank. Now, the producer could also be a supplier to the food bank. So the distributor is the food bank. That's the market out.
Right. The producer is the farmer supplying the food. The distributor in this case is the food banks who are going to further distribute it to pantries in underserved areas. So now, so right now, our distributors are the food banks who have agreed to take part in this, as well as one other distributor who works in underserved areas of the state. And so the distributor is not going to be a producer.
No. I clearly understand that. I just want to make sure that I understood that there's only one category for a distributor, and that distributor is food bank itself. So there's only that category is the distributor is the food bank. So only those participating food banks would complete the distributor side of it. So we know that there's only one market. The market opportunity from a distributor perspective are the food banks. That's sole source point and how those come back in. And then you have the various producers that will supply those food banks. And of course, as I said, the food bank with the major volume is in the central region and of course, northwest Arkansas. And I'm not sure, possibly northeast Arkansas. I don't know what it's like in the Jonesboro area down through there. But I do know that. But we'll get a list of all that and all of the other cost factors to go in. I know you said you would not do a standard. That would not be a standard cost model that you would have a cookie cutter type of cost factor as related to transportation. So if one uses a per mile formula on calculating cost of transportation, that is acceptable.
Yes.
Okay, all right. That's all.
That is acceptable. And go ahead.
I have one other question. I'm just and I forgot I said had 3 or 4 categories on that question. The other one there is in reference to one of the questions, the statement is in reference to certification. And in one part that I was reading, it gave reference to USDA certification and state certification. What specifically is that in reference to on certification? I want to make, I know we have to have clarity on that. Can we have, well, just, I need to ask on that one, on that certification area.
It's a question being asked. As part of the grant, the producer does not have to be GAP certified with USDA. Okay. That is not a requirement, but we're just asking, are you? And if there are state regulations as far as placed on producers, does the producer have that? It's just for informational purposes right now, but if your USDA has said that this purchasing from a producer does not require that GAP certification, but should follow state guidelines.
Okay, that's about that's still, that's pretty broad. And when you say the state guidelines, I guess my question then would be, does the food bank have specific requirements as with them being state food banks? Do they have guidelines that they have to adhere to buy from these suppliers? Are there already established guidelines that the food bank has to abide by from a state perspective? Because that's where the area is going to be, where the distributors are, and if they have guidelines and requirements as the distributor and buyer, what are those guidelines? If there are any, then will the producers have to adhere to those guidelines that the food bank require, if there are any?
Yes, I am not aware of any requirements that they would place as far as things like GAP certification or things like that. They may like negotiate boxing or packaging or, things like that. As far as how the product is delivered, but no requirements that I know of as far as certifications that the producer would have to have.
What about packing requirements? Well, two questions on that on packing. One, are there packing requirements on the part of the food bank? And two, on the type of packages that may be required, will those supplies, or are those supplies purchased from the food bank? Will it be available from the food bank to meet those specifications for packing? Do you have to just identify the type of packages that they like to accept, whether it's a bulk type of packing or a smaller scale type of packing? And if it's by crate, if it's by bag, would you get that from the food bank?
Right, and that's in the negotiation when you're describing it. Each farmer may have a different packaging, and their cost or their price should include any packaging. Now, a lot of these food banks can distribute and can accept bulk packaging because they have volunteers that are separating it, putting in boxes that then gets delivered to the pantries in these underserved areas. Right. And so, if you have something special, I don't know, let's take beef or pork or chicken or fish. There's obviously packaging that goes into items like that. And so build that into your price.
Well,
and tell the food bank, this is how we're going to package it for you. If at that time the food bank says, no, we can't accept 20-pound packages of chicken, because that means they've got to repackage, which they cannot do, then they can say, okay, can you get us the chicken in 5 or 10-pound bags? And so that cost, the producer can then build that cost in with their bid.
Well, we're dealing right now.
I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. If there's the major point, and again, we'll be asking for this from the food bank or from DHS, the list of all those food banks, so we can make the specific contact with them and get that information directly from them. So we know that's a necessity, and we've had discussions in the office about that, what that process and how we structure that process. But the other thing, and this may be a little far-reaching. Of course, we're talking primarily when we say social disadvantage and the minority segment of the population, African American particularly, that we work with. Then when you gave reference to the aquaculture, a fish market, and the chicken market. Of course, that kind of really takes us out of it. My question is this: if an individual wanted to be a supplier and had an agreement with a processor that actually processes, then could that, just to use myself as an example, I have an agreement with a processing facility because I have my brand. My brand is KC quality poultry product. And so on the KC quality product, and I have my with my brand, and they are going to supply this chicken or poultry with my brand, X number of pounds. So could I be a supplier to a distributor with my brand, with it coming from a different manufacturer, from a manufacturer, Tyson, for example, and Tyson, I can get an agreement with Tyson on that.
And if I understand, let's say you have the chicken farm and you send it to a processor for processing, which is then sold. That
Right.
processing is part of the cost, and that is acceptable. You know, same with like beef. We don't expect you to herd cattle, you know, to the food bank. You know, there is a processing portion that's needed to get it to families. And so that is acceptable cost to have done. So in your normal business, that's, you know, how you grow and you have processed and then it goes to market. Those are all costs that are that can be charged and be reimbursed for.
Yeah, I clearly, I just want to know if that process is acceptable, even if I wasn't producing the livestock, I wasn't producing the fish, but you have you become an actual buyer directly back from the manufacturer. A manufacturing direct purchase is much different from even a wholesale distribution operation, so that has to be, but I won't get into that. That's another whole, we'll have that conversation either in person at your office, I'll just write it. I'll send it to you in writing. That's all I have.
No, but,
Yes.
but one thing I do want to get out to everyone, and it'll probably be the first part of July, is the list of the distributors and the list of the producers that we have to date. It's very easy to add producers. I don't want to put a deadline on it, but during this 2-year process, we can always add the producers, the farmers to the list. But as soon as possible, I want to send out the list of what we have as distributors, where they're located, what counties they'll be working in, as well as the list of farmers that have agreed to participate in this program. And that way, both the producer and the distributor can start thinking about what they want to order. The producer can think about, okay, I can start calling these folks and start marketing what I have to them and start that conversation. So I want to get you that list as quickly as we can, and I'm looking at first part of July. And it's going to be a ever-changing list. We're going to be adding to it as we go along. One thing I'll say about the school grant that is coming up, really the only difference from the producer's side for the school grant is that it's minimally processed. Whereas for the food banks, it could be canned, it could be, processed. However, they don't have any limitations on the processing. For the schools, however, there is they term it as minimally processed food items. So that's the only difference in those two.
Yes, Jim or James, good morning. This is Albert.
Yeah,
I have one of our producers with us from Forest City, and he was under the impression something different. Evidently, he had talked with somebody from the Forest City area. His name is Mr. Andrew Beam, and I'm going to give the microphone to him.
Yeah, I wanted to know about
Okay.
the food bank. I haven't talked to anybody there, but I will. Can. So I'd like to know a little bit about Forest City. There's a food pantry there in Forest City.
It's a pantry, not a food bank. Let me just, two things. One, I'll make sure that as I understand it, James, correct me as I go along with this. One, the food pantry, state food pantry, all the different food pantries in Arkansas, that's a sole source. That is the distributor. The food pantry supply the food banks. So that is the major outlet. So those large food pantries, the food pantry supply the food banks. Am I right on that, James?
it's the other way around. The food bank is the big warehouse distributing center. And then they supply, right, and they supply the food pantry, which would be, say, in Forest City.
Right.
And so, we just have to make sure that they take part in the emergency as a pantry. If not, I'm sure there's a pantry there that does take part in the program. But of course, the distribution and where the producers would send the food would not be to the local pantry. They just don't have the room or facilities to store and distribute large quantities like that. So it'd be coming to the food banks as the major warehouse and distribution center.
Thank you so much, James. We would like to be mindful of the individuals we have online during this Q&A session. Is there anyone online has a question for James? He calls himself Jim also. So it's James and Jim are the same individual. Is there anyone online that has a question?
And feel free after this meeting, you may come up with questions and may think about things, or you may be shy to ask during the meeting, but I'm available. Demetrios is available. We're available to assist in any way we can. This is something that we're excited about because over the 15 years that I've been working in food distribution with USDA, the hardest link has been getting the farmers and the schools, or the farmers and the food banks together. And we're excited about it. We're here to help in any way we can. And it's a wonderful opportunity for our state.
Yes, my name is Bernard Thompson. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm a small farmer in Northeast Arkansas, Blytheville, and there's a lot of us that's small here. How does this work for me? An acre or less? How does it work for me?
For you, you don't have to be large. You can be small, and especially with the schools. The schools don't need large quantities at any given time. So us building that gap and bringing you and the schools together is a great fit. And even with the food banks, there may be some things that you have available that's perfect. It's in a smaller quantity. They can get it to these underserved areas quicker. And so it's all positive for you. It's just, letting us and letting the distributors know what you have, what time of year you have the items, what quantities you anticipate, and things like that. And so that helps us bridge that gap between either you and the food banks and you and the schools.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any more questions from online guests? With that being said.
And if not, I think you all have our contact information, and feel free to email or call or with any questions.
Okay.
James, I want to be clear on one thing, that the deadline when these applications are to be in is just the 25th or the 30th of this month.
That's more for the distributors. We want to line them up because we have to make sure if there's distributors we don't have contracts with, that we set those up. For the farmers, yes, I would like to get them in as soon as they are able to. But at any point during the grant period, we'll accept their applications and provide their information to the distributors and add them to the list.
Okay, so you will actually accept or take application over this 2-year grant period ongoing, application from producers.
Yes.
Okay.
We want to give every opportunity, and there's more different things that could happen with the producer, whether it's the supply or weather or whatever. They may see how it goes this first year. They may want to wait, and if till next growing season. We don't want to limit time for the producers as far as getting in their application. Of course, we'd love to have as many on the list when we send out the list to y'all in July, and so that you can start marketing your items. But I'm not going to make it a requirement that you have it in by the end of the month.
Great, that answers my question on that.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Got one more question.
Sure.
I do have a question about Purple Hub Peas.
Put the mic up a little too.
Okay.
Would you tell them who you are?
Yes, I'm Ruthie Burnett. And I have a question about Purple Hub Peas and packaging. So I know that they don't last long without being shelled. And when we sell, as we sell them in quarts and gallons. How do we know what the food bank, how would we figure out how to do that for the food bank? How do we package them? Do we package them in the quarts or the gallons, or how do we figure that out? And the same with okra.
Like when you send in your application and you say, I have purple peas, I have okra. This is how we package it. And be upfront with the distributor. If they want something different that you cannot do, that's fine. If they want something different that you can do and it costs a little more money, well, they need to pay for that. the food banks are pretty versatile. There are times we send them bulk product. We send them, say, 5-gallon drums of frozen blueberries. You know, or they may like bigger packaging, like the gallon size, to go to soup kitchens that are in need. So I would just be upfront with, okay, here's our typical packaging, you know, and what you typically do in your normal course of business. And you can always put, if you want something different, reach out and let me know, you know, and that's the time for communicating, negotiating, and contacting each other. So you know that up front. Does that help?
Oh, yes. My husband got a portion about tomatoes.
Yeah, bring tomatoes up there, ready?
Tomatoes?
Yeah, bring tomatoes. I named it Carver. And I got at least about 2 bushels of green tomatoes need to be big. People right now selling the red tomatoes, but I got some green tomatoes ready to take about. I said about 2 bushels. What about getting rid of them right now? Well,
Yeah, I mean, it's too early for them right now, but like in the application, if you put like green tomatoes, they're available during this time period, and this is the quantity you anticipate having available, you know, or red tomatoes, and this is the time period to have them shipped, you know, here's the time period and here's an approximate quantity that we have available. I mean, if you're growing like, say the gentleman in Blytheville on an acre farm, you want to communicate with the distributor or help us communicate for you the size that you have, because you won't want to be flooded with calls from, say, 150 schools if you only have an acre, you know. And so by describing what you have, describing your packaging, describing time periods and approximate quantities, that's going to go far in communicating with the distributors and getting that ball started.
okay, thank you very much.
James, this is Calvin King. And let me just say this, and everyone who both online and those in person, what Arkansas Land and Community Development Corporation is doing, those individuals who are seeking, who want our assistance, we will develop for them, and some of them we are putting together right now. We will have a full profile of each farm operation. We'll have a schedule of their crops, what the production of growing seasons are for those crops, whether they're summer, spring crops, whether they're fall crops, and the time period those crops will be coming in. So each food pantry would get that publication on that farm, knowing the scheduled crops, knowing the scheduled production and harvesting time period for those crops. So you'll know whether those crops are coming off in the fall, those crops are coming out off in the summer months. And of course, we can definitely work with them on dealing with what those packaging options, a full description of the type of packaging capabilities that exist and what is the common packaging of each one of those farming operations. But we put together those type of plans for each farming operation. I do have one other question though, and I want to make sure, because we also work with them on dealing with the business plans of it. On each crop enterprise, and you mentioned that you'll be paying whatever the market price is for those products. I'm assuming, my assumption on a per pound basis, I'm speaking to vegetables now. What market do you look at? Is that based on the Chicago market, which is more the market that's used for this region in Arkansas? Would it be St. Louis? Which market?
I'm looking at the producer's price.
What-
I'm looking at the producer's price.
Okay, so-
And
okay,
not
okay.
setting a market. I'm not gonna tell you, what you should sell your product for.
Very good.
So-
That in dealing with the business plan, that's very crucial. So we're dealing with a business plan for this market, then we really project what it's going to be on a per pound basis produced off of this acre. So we can project what the revenue cost is, income against what the operating expenses are. Okay, great. That's great. I like that
Right.
pricing basis behind that. Thank you very much.
And I didn't want to say like retail price, wholesale price, I don't want to run your businesses. I don't want to run your farms. I want you to be able to negotiate with the distributor and we have the funds, so, and it's quite a bit. And it's music to my ears knowing that there is the Arkansas Land Community Development Corporation in assisting the local farmers, and you're doing a wonderful job, and boy, helping just to present us with who everyone is, what they can provide, and all of that is wonderful, and we do appreciate all the work you're doing and all the work that the producers are doing. This is these opportunities for us. This is the first time this opportunity has come up for us. And so we're learning along with you. and we hope with seeing what's coming up in the bills, the Farm Bill and some of the other bills, right now going through the different committees, they're pushing for more money for local farmers, and so it's wonderful, and we're just proud to be a part of it.
And this is Leonard Thompson again. I got one other question. I keep hearing application, and I guess I came in a little late on that. What's the process on that?
The application may look a little daunting and confusing because it has both information from the distributor, if you're a distributor, or if you're a farmer. And so we can make sure you get that application. And it sounds like the commission will help guide you, in completing that application.
Where do we get the applications from?
We can send that to you. Does the Arkansas Land Commission
Yes,
have
we have some of the application.
that application?
Yes, Leonard.
Okay, if you have it and
Yeah,
we can provide it.
Okay.
James, we do it. Jim,
That's
James,
great.
we do have applications that we can send it to Leonard. Or anybody else who requests one, we do have.
Good.
All right, I would like to thank everyone for joining. This is Albert Jones. We're going to, are there any more questions from the individuals online? Would like to thank Arkansas Department for joining us, Jim. And secondly, I'm going to let Dr. King have closing remarks. I'd like to just thank the audience we have here in person and the ones online. If there are any additional questions, you guys can call me at 870-734-3005. Our phone number is 870-734-3005. 3005, and we will assist anyone in the development of the application. With that being said, we're going to have Dr. King give closing remarks. Thank you so much.
But again, express my appreciation to everyone. James, I would definitely like to have an in-person meeting back with you and with the State Department of Agriculture. I do feel that this can become a very permanent type situation, and on the entitlement basis and where that revenue would be or how it would have to be done as we develop this over this 2-year period of time. But there is a way to do it. It would possibly have to be done with by way of, and 2 other states we've been talking with on a multi-state basis, which makes it regional. But based on what we're doing here now, I think we can definitely create the model for what could be looked at for the next year to replicate it from the multi-state perspective. And of course, the Department of Agriculture would definitely need to be involved with this, with DHS. But the major market outlet and the way this is structured right now, let me commend you for that, and you are going forward. That primary market outlet being the food bank is very, very key. It could create opportunities to expand or build more capacity for food pantries on local food supply, food deserts. I think that definitely is a key component for it. So I'm looking forward to working with you, and as we look at some broader spectrums of this and where it is now. And again, I'm going to ask Mr. Tucker, Michael Tucker, our IT person. We'll also have this application put up on our website for all of those who are online. And again, as Albert mentioned, you give us a call, we'll get an email back out to you, but we'll put it on the website. You go to the website, access it and print it off. We will make it readily available, James, back out to all our individual producers, and possibly a possibility with this being an ongoing application process. Those who receive our newsletter, we'll do a summarization of this particular application, and we'll have it in our next distribution outlet that will be coming out. And I'll probably be doing a talk show in Eastern Arkansas about this in the next week or so as well. James, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Again, I commend DHS and your work and what you're doing. It's a great opportunity now, I think, for Arkansas, for our producers, and for the food pantry and the food bank, and the food desert issue being addressed more in Arkansas. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. No, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and your group, and we're available for you anytime. And I want to thank you.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. And we're going to close at this point. Thanks to all of those who participated, and we'll look forward to working with you on a one-on-one basis and getting all the information that's required in to meet the application requirement. Thanks a lot.